Well, this is not a singing competition, but if there would be a singing contest in the English grammar, your verb will be the winner. Why? Of all the concepts in English, only verb has the voice. Hello everyone, this is Teacher Dom and it's time to learn English the better way. One of the most underrated topics in English is actually the active and passive voice of the verb. Many of us do not realize that almost all sentences that we read could actually be examples of either active or passive voice. In this lesson, I'm going to give you an in-depth discussion of the difference between the two and how are we going to transform active voice to passive voice or vice versa. Once again, this is not a singing competition. We are not going to talk about someone else's voice here, but rather we are going to discuss the voice of the verb. When we say voice of the verb, we always pertain to two things, the active and the passive voice. But remember, before you can fully understand these two concepts, you have to know first the three basic components of a sentence. With these three, it will be easier for you to learn the active and passive voice. Now, let's try to look at our sentence here. Daniel hugged Liza. In this sentence, Daniel is our subject. When we say subject, it is the topic in the sentence. It answers the question, who or what are we talking about? Okay? So if I'm going to ask you, who are we talking about in the sentence? It is actually Daniel. We are talking about Daniel. Therefore, Daniel is our subject. Now, what did Daniel do in the sentence? Daniel hugged Liza. The word hugged is now our verb. When we say verb, it is the action taken by the subject. So it answers the question, what is the action taken by the subject? Okay? Now, Liza is our direct object. When we say direct object, it is the receiver of the action. It typically answers questions starting with whom, to whom, or for whom. So there you go. These are the three basic components of a sentence. Now, let's proceed to our main topic, the active and passive voice. Remember, in active and passive voice, we always focus our attention first on the verb of the sentence. Why? Because we are actually talking about the voice of the verb. Now, going back to our sentence, Daniel hugged Liza. In this case, we now know that the word hugged is the action taken in the sentence. Again, I'd like to ask you, who performed the action? Who did the hugging? It's Daniel. Therefore, Daniel is the doer of the action. Okay, now, who received hug from Daniel? It's Liza. Therefore, Liza is the receiver of the action. Now look, the doer of the action in our sentence is actually the subject. In this case, if the subject is the doer of the action, we call it the active voice. So once again, in active voice, the subject of the sentence is the doer of the action. Look at our first sentence. The city government will establish a new amusement park next year. Can you help me locate where is the verb in the sentence? Very good. It's actually the word establish. But this time, we have the term verb phrase. When we say phrase, it is a combination of two or more words, but not expressing a complete thought. Look, we have the modal will and the main verb establish. That is why we call it verb phrase. Now, who will establish a new amusement park next year? Exactly, the city government. Therefore, this is the doer of the action. Final question for this sentence. What will the city government establish next year? Very good. A new amusement park. Therefore, this is the receiver of the action. Now look, the doer of the action is actually the subject of the sentence. Therefore, it is a perfect example of active voice. Now let's go to the next one. Facebook warns users about fake accounts. Now, where is the verb in this sentence? Very good. The word warns. This is the verb. Now, who warns users about fake accounts? Exactly. Facebook is the doer of the action. Now, for whom is the warning of Facebook? Whom does Facebook warn about fake accounts? Excellent. The users. They are now the receiver of the action. In this case again, look at the doer of the action. It is actually the topic of the sentence, the subject of the sentence. Again, this is a perfect example of active voice. Now I want you to take note of this. In active voice, the doer of the action is always written first before the verb, and after the verb is actually the receiver of the action. I repeat, the structure for active voice is this. The doer of the action always comes first before the verb, then the receiver of the action. That is for active voice. Now, what if I'd like to write the sentence this way? Liza was hugged by Daniel. This time, it is no longer an example of active voice, but rather it is for passive voice. Now, look what happened to passive voice. Focus on the structure. A while back, our subject was Daniel, the doer of the action. Now look who is now the subject of the sentence. It's now Liza, the receiver of the action. And look what happened to our verb. It now turned into a verb phrase. Why? Because it is now a combination of the past tense of the verb be, which is was, and of course our main verb, hugged. Now if you're going to ask me, sir, what happened to Daniel? Our doer of the action is now part of the so-called prepositional phrase, okay? Look, Daniel, the doer of the action, is now preceded by the preposition by, okay? In passive voice, most of the time, you would see the word by, okay? So that is the structure for the passive voice. So again, when we say passive voice, the subject is the receiver of the action. For example, here, first sentence. A new amusement park will be established by the city government next year. In this case, will be established is our verb phrase. Who will establish a new amusement park? City government. So it will remain the doer of the action in this sentence, okay? But this time, look, it is now written after the verb phrase, right after the preposition by. Okay, so where is now the receiver of the action? It's actually here. A new amusement park is the receiver of the action. We are now talking about a new amusement park. Therefore, the receiver of the action is now the subject of the sentence. Okay? Now let's go to the second one. Users are warned by Facebook about fake accounts. In this case, are warned is now the verb phrase in the sentence. Okay? Still, who is performing the action? Facebook, the Facebook management, the group of people behind Facebook. So this is the doer of the action. And we know since a while back that the word users is actually the receiver of the action. This time, look again. The doer of the action appeared right after the preposition by. Now this time, I'm going to teach you how to transform your active voice to passive voice or vice versa. Actually, it is so easy, especially if you know the structure for each voice. Look, in active voice, the doer of the action is always written first before the verb and then the receiver of action. In active voice again, the doer of the action is the subject of the sentence. Now, if we're going to transform this one into a passive voice, it's this. Look at the positioning of the doer of the action and the receiver of action. In passive voice, the receiver of action will be the subject of the sentence, okay? And then the doer of the action will become part of your prepositional phrase. Why? Because the doer of the action now is preceded by the preposition by, okay? Now let's focus on the main verb. Why? Because we're talking about voice of the verb, okay? In active voice, you will see it only has the main verb hugged, okay? With ed, therefore it is in past tense, okay? Now look what happened to our verb in passive voice. It now transformed into a verb phrase, right? Okay, when we say verb phrase in passive voice, it is always a combination of the verb be plus the past participle of the main verb. Remember, in passive voice, the verb be is actually the key ingredient. All your main verbs in passive voice will be in past participle form. The only thing that will change is actually the verb be. In this case, look, in active voice, the word hugged is actually in past tense. Therefore, in passive voice, again, the only thing that will change is the verb be. What is the past tense of the verb be? It's actually was, okay? That is for the verb of each voice. Now, let's dig deeper. Let me review you first about the conjugation of the verb be. The future tense of this verb is actually will be. For the present tense, we have is for the singular subjects and are for the plural. And for the past tense, we have was for the singular and were for the plural. Remember this because this is the key ingredient for your passive voice. Now let's go to this one. If the tense of your verb is in simple future, for example, Marky will draw the picture of the book. This is an example of active voice. Why? Marky is the doer of the action and at the same time, he is the subject of the sentence. The picture of the book is now the direct object, the receiver of action. If we're going to transform this sentence to passive voice, it's this. The picture of the book will be drawn by Marky. Again, the picture of the book is the subject, which is now the receiver of action. Now, let's focus on the verb. It is now a combination of the verb be plus the past participle of the verb draw. What is the past participle of the verb draw? It's actually drawn, okay? Remember, in simple future, what is the future tense of the verb be? Go back to the table. It's actually will be. Therefore, we will retain the modal will. And then just write the verb be and then the past participle of the verb draw, which is drawn. Okay? Now, what if the tense of the verb is in simple present? For example, Marky draws the picture of the book. In this case, we will say the picture of the book is drawn by Marky. Now, look at our verb phrase. Again, the main verb in the active voice will always be transformed to its past participle form. Okay? And then, look at the be form. Why did we use the verb is? Because the main verb in the active voice is in simple present. What is the present tense of the verb be? It's either is or are. Here, the picture of the book or the picture is actually in singular form. Therefore, we used the verb is. Okay? Now, what about for simple past tense? By the way, what is the past tense of the verb draw? Very good. It's actually the word drew. In this case, we say Marky drew the picture of the book. So for this one, we shall say the picture of the book was drawn by Marky. Again, in passive voice, it's always the combination of the verb be plus past participle. But why did we use the word was in this sentence? It is because in active voice, we have the word drew, which is in simple past tense. Again, what is the past tense of the verb be? It's either was or were. We have the picture, as the subject, which is singular, therefore we use was. Okay? For more tenses of verb, we have future be going to. For example, Romy is going to write the text of the book. In passive voice, we say the text of the book are going to be written by Romy. For present continuous, we say Romy is writing the text of the book. So in passive voice, you will say the text of the book are being written by Romy. And of course, for past continuous, Romy was writing the text of the book. For passive voice, you should say the text of the book were being written by Romy. And before we end this session, I want you to answer this one. You're going to transform this active sentence to its passive counterpart. I'm going to pause the video for 10 seconds, but if you need more time for your answer, feel free to pause the video yourself. And then after 10 seconds, I'm going to go back with the answer and proper explanation. Now, your 10 seconds starts now. Since we're talking about the voice of the verb here, always remember to look at the verb in the sentence. In this case, we have the word imposes. President Duterte is the doer, of course, and a stricter civic law is the receiver of the action. In passive voice, as we all know, the receiver of the action should be your subject. Therefore, we write a stricter civic law. And then we put the doer of the action at the last part of the sentence, preceded by the word or by the preposition by. Okay? Now, let's go to the main thing, our verb phrase, which is a combination of the verb be plus the past participle of the main verb. What is the past participle of the verb impose? Very good. Imposed. Now, what is now the form of the verb be? Look at the active sentence. The main verb is in present tense. Therefore, what is the present tense of the verb be if the subject is singular? Very good. It's actually the word is. Therefore, the correct answer is a stricter civic law is imposed by President Duterte. If that is your answer, then I would like to congratulate you. It means to say that you have learned a lot in this topic, and I hope so, okay? So there you go, those are the two voices of verb in the English grammar. If you learned a lot in this video, please do not hesitate to click the subscribe button below to get updated with my next video tutorial. Once again, this is Teacher Dom, helping you to learn English the better way.